Hello, everyone. Welcome to my show, Critically Random. The show where we talk about and critique anime through writing and direction and offer our thoughts on upcoming projects, whether it be anime, movies, or live action series. I'm Screen Direction, the creator of Critically Random, and this is my co-host, Hawk Flame.
Hey everyone, I'm Hawk Flame, and I'm absolutely freaking tired right now.
Aren't we all? But we are just really happy to keep this podcast going, and now it is officially on YouTube. As you might have noticed, if you did listen to our first episode, which was about One Punch Man, and then offering our thoughts on the live-action Cowboy Bebop, I wasn't certain at the time that this would go on YouTube, and even at the time, I had used a completely different screen name / YouTube name. But yeah, I've been this podcast has actually been inspiring me to start a whole nother channel already where I'll make videos, and I've decided to go with this name, so Screen Direction.
Okay.
So, with that being said, topics to cover for today, we'll be doing a review on the anime Erased, which came out in 2016, and a review of the recently released live-action Death Note, which came out on Netflix.
And we have a lot to say about that.
Oh boy, do we. Alright, so let's get started then. So, Erased. This is an anime that came out from the studio A1 Pictures, which notoriously released Sword Art Online. The anime is based off a manga. It's only 12 episodes, maybe a little short. The director of Erased is Tomohiko Ito, who actually, interestingly enough, was also the director of Sword Art Online, and was also the assistant director of the anime Death Note. So, I don't know, it sounds like a lot of the dots of today's topics we're talking about today are connecting already. But yeah, so just to now go into Erased. So first of all, the premise of Erased. Erased is dressed up as a part mystery and part thriller with a time-traveling edge to it. Mm-hmm. And the story centers around a guy, Satoru, a 29-year-old male who experiences a phenomena that he calls revival. Now, in this phenomena, he goes back in time to prevent a tragic incident from occurring. Erased is also the story about a serial killer. But underneath all this, Erased tries to be a lot more. It tries to transcend the thriller genre by combining it with the concepts of superhero stories, or more specifically, hyper-realistic superhero stories. In this way, Erased actually feels like an M. Night Shyamalan movie. I don't want to linger too much on this concept, though, as I want to talk about it more in depth in a video I'm going to do in the future for my second YouTube channel. That being said, Erased also gives me a distinct Death Note vibe to it. This being the case when we hear Satoru's thoughts of his next move to find and stop the serial killer reminds me of Light Yagami and L. Alright, so having said all this, Hawk Flame, just what are your quick thoughts already from all this?
I think it was a very interesting idea. I really first of all, just flat out saying I did enjoy the show a lot. I thought it was very interestingly executed. The M. Night Shyamalan vibe, I could sort of see where you're coming from with that. But I really like the different levels that it was going at with the different timelines, and sort of how each timeline affected the other, what else was going on in the other one, and how all that all kind of intertwined. I thought that was very much. I think it was really on point when you're comparing it to Death Note, because of the fact that with Death Note, there was an element of almost like, can you top this? Like, this twist happens, he fixes this issue, then something else happens to complicate that, so they try to fix that issue, and then something else happens to complicate that. That's what's going on between Light and L in the anime, at least. It's so there was that kind of he tries to take care of one thing, but then that causes something else to happen. I thought that was particularly interesting and well done in Erased.
Yeah, Tomohiko Ito, the director of Erased, this is really interesting to me because he was the assistant director of Death Note, and he was also an episode director of other animes like Monster, and yet he has been sort of a powerhouse director for a studio like A1 Pictures, which has, infamously done Sword Art Online, which he was the director of. So this guy, to me, is interesting in a bizarre way with... It's like I really like his directing style, and I can't help but feel vibes and influence of M. Night Shyamalan, and just that overall that whole Death Note aesthetic to his directing style, and that screams in Erased. But at the same time, the art style and a little bit of the pacing as well was akin to an A1 Pictures anime, just not overly like Sword Art Online, where SAO was more of a flashy kind of anime, trying to appeal to the masses, trying to be something mainstream. So this still held true to the essence of Ito and kind of his own vision and style, but kind of an interesting blend between that and an A1 show.
Yeah. I'll have to say this. It definitely had the most interesting idea of a lot of animes I've seen in recent years. The mystery, the way it was handled. I think that you kind of really laid into a point when you talk about his style there. I thought that there was a certain. It was, again, I hesitate repeating this, but it was a really M. Night Shyamalan type of vibe there, and he has a good way of creating a sense of mystery. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Although the mystery aspect to Erased wasn't really the strong point to this show, interestingly enough. But yeah, he's good at setting up a mystery. Unfortunately, the mystery aspect to the show wasn't really the big payoff in it. Mm-hmm. The ending itself wasn't exactly the best payoff either, but that's getting ahead of ourselves. Yeah. But where I do think where Erased really does shine is in the genre of a suspense thriller. So that's one of the things I really like about the show. Another aspect to the show I liked a lot was just Satoru's character writing. I felt was extremely relatable for an anime character. I can't really think of too many anime characters I've seen in the last 10, 15 years where I could look at that character and be like, he's relatable. I can relate to him. Mm-hmm. I think one of the reasons why I might have felt this way is because I either read somewhere or I heard somewhere. My memory is a little vague now, but I heard at some point that they hired a non-professional voice actor to voice Satoru. And they did this on purpose so that they didn't want him to sound too anime-ish and kind of keep to this strange, realistic tone to the show. I also liked his dynamic with Hinazuki, the girl that he's trying to save. This was done pretty well, I thought, in terms of the character's growing relationship. It felt very natural, not really rushed, although it was 12 episodes, which I still felt was a little short. Could have used just one more. It really just needed one more episode to feel complete. But regardless of that, character relationship and development felt very natural. Satoru's mother was also really nice, nicely fleshed out. We buy that she is a strong mother and just a strong person in general. And her relationship with Satoru is what I think an example of what a good mother and son relationship should be. So Hawk.
Yeah, I have to agree with that, because especially when you hit on the mother-son relationship, because she's not an ideal. She's not idealized. She's very much a human being, is that, but at the same time, she very much cares about her son, and she's very much devoted to her son, and she's very much a mother in that sense. But at the same time, she's not, she's someone who, doesn't put up a lot of bullshit. She's someone who is very tough, and she's a reporter by nature. So I could sort of see where Satoru gets a lot of that from. And you also spoke about how great character Satoru was earlier. One of the things I did like is the fact that, unfortunately, a lot of anime characters these days kind of fall into either to a couple of different tropes. Like they're either a blank slate, or a lot of the characters are sort of like hyper, or they're basically kind of like a Mary Sue, who they're too clever, and they're too smart for their own good, or they're just like not a non-personality. This is
Kirito.
Yeah. This is someone who feels like a real person who's smart, but he makes mistakes, but he's able to look through some certain clues and piece things together like an actual intelligent thinking person would, and he's someone who cares, who's someone who is very well realized. He's I think that he's one of the stronger main characters I've seen so far in the anime in the last couple of years because of this.
Yeah, definitely. I will say, I did think it was a little bit of a shame that Erased had a few plot holes and some pretty noticeable flaws. But I mean, overall, I still enjoyed it a lot, despite it not having a very well tied in ending. Mm-hmm. One of the big things I applaud the show for, besides character arcs and character development, is one of the themes the show does touch on, and really does not shy away from this. So it just dives right in, is the topic of child abuse. This is a topic that I have seen in some other media, but I feel like it's not really presented well enough. Mm-hmm. At least not in a way that is extreme, as believable as it was presented here in Erased. Erased, like I said, may not have the most well-crafted mystery I've ever seen, but its story execution was overall very clever, and it dared to be different. I think that's the real point I'm trying to really drive at here, is that the show was never afraid of trying to be different, and this is something we really, really need to see in more anime nowadays. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have to agree. Especially about the point about the mystery. I'm not gonna spoil anything, but I fortunately was, even though I sort of half figured it out in the middle. Like I kind of had my suspicions as to what the solution was, but then I was, unfortunately, in the YouTube video, I was completely spoiled about it. But then as I kept on watching, it sort of almost didn't matter. Because first of all, that's not it's not the big it's not not even revealed. They don't even save that for the final episode. They actually reveal that earlier than I thought it would. The nature of the mystery, but again, it's more about the storytelling. It's more about these characters, and more about like what happens next after each little twist takes place in their lives, which is what I really liked.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, now I'll just I'm going to go over some of the really specific flaws in Erased without spoiling anything. We will save that in a spoiler section of the review. But just to finish the general review, the murder mystery part of Erased, as I said, unfortunately wasn't really the strong point to the show or the most captivating. I'd say it's easy enough to spot the culprit after episode 6 or by episode 6. Another anime to make a comparison that has a better murder mystery to it would be Higurashi no Nakokoro ni. Mm-hmm. That one, it really keeps you guessing and on the edge of your seat in the entire time. But I mean, one thing that Higurashi had going for it was that it was based off video games, and Erased was based off a manga. Mm-hmm. Now, I will say, though, the time travel element in Erased was a lot stronger, and how cleverly it was able to use Satoru balancing between the two timelines, you know, between his past in 1988 and his present, which and the show's present being in 2006. Unfortunately, it's never really explained to us how Satoru got his power called Revival. But I mean, this technically does land as a minor flaw in the show. I didn't really mind it as much, that it was never really explained to us, as I kind of just took it as something similar to like what M. Night Shyamalan would have done, since I noticed in a lot of his movies just these weird phenomena happen with not too much really explanation at all. But so I mean, this is a small plot hole. Another anime to draw a comparison that does use time travel very heavily and does tie in pretty much everything, all the loose ends presented, would be Steins Gate, which in comparison used the time travel elements much more effectively, especially for a second viewing of that series. So Erased, unfortunately, doesn't really do this for us. But Erased, honestly, it fits best as a suspense thriller, as I mentioned before, rather than a murder mystery. So yeah, Hawk,
Yeah.
do you have anything else?
Actually, it just occurred to me that it did remind me of the whole core time travel element. Did kind of remind me of another work I was thinking of. It's not an anime. It's actually a movie. I think it was just remade as a TV series on the CW called Frequency. If you're not familiar with the idea of frequency, is that, well, there's no time travel involved. What happens is that there's, in the modern day, there's like a cop in the modern day who uses like a CB radio, and through that CB radio, he manages to contact his father from 20 years ago, who died right before his death. And so between them, over the CB radio, him in the current day and his father like 20, 30 years ago are sort of trying to work together to solve this the murder of their mother. And so that kind of, and so it did, that whole element did remind me of that. And I wish almost, I don't want to know how much spoiler I want to go into, but I wish it did more in that direction, especially in the later episodes goes, because I was not entirely satisfied. I mean, I was satisfied, but was not entirely satisfied as to how those two parallel timelines situations kind of resolved each other. But I thought that it was a very interesting idea. I had to agree with that. Basically, pretty much everything that SD already went through over here is pretty much on point.
Yeah. So let's get into closing thoughts. Our last bit of thoughts, and give a final score, and then we will, in fact, go into a spoiler section of what we thought. But yeah, so I thought Erased had really strong characters. It had an interesting use of time travel. It had solid, heavy themes like child abuse. Satoru, he makes for a very relatable protagonist, unlike a lot of other anime characters who I've seen who are OP. Kirito. Sorry, SAO fans. Erased is overall very well directed and has pretty decent writing. It does, however, have its flaws. It's not so great as a murder mystery, and for a time travel element in the story, it is still pale in comparison to something like Steins Gate. Mm-hmm. One thing that we didn't really have really a chance to go over in the review, but I would like to just touch on quickly was one character in Erased, Irie, the girl that he works with in the present time. I would have liked to see some more screen time from her, as I also thought she was a pretty good character for what limited time we were given from her. So it's kind of a shame that we didn't see more of her. Also, we could have used more backstory from the killer himself.
Or herself.
Or herself, yeah. Yeah, so the ending of Erased, along with the mystery aspects to it, really are just the weakest parts. It's really that one aspect to it that you kind of have to just take and swallow. But it's hard for me to say anything more without just completely spoiling anything. So I mean, I'll just leave it at that. I mean, Erased is a solid suspense thriller. So my final score will be, I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10.
I'm for the most part in agreement. I do think that also in addition to some of the flaws that you listed, like I guess this ties into the whole issue of the ending, but a lot of the character arcs weren't really satisfactorily handled. There's some questions about some of the characters or what they were doing that I don't think are really addressed. But on the whole, that was really well done. The main character was a really well written main character. The plot as opposed to the mystery itself, the plot was well handled. I think that I would give it a 7 out of 10.
Okay, so let's go into spoilers. The fun stuff. Alright, so I'm gonna go right ahead and compare Satoru and the killer, who was Yashiro. He was the teacher. So, in some ways, as I said, I thought Erased did feel like Death Note, with the relationship between Satoru and Yashiro, and how it can be loosely compared with Light and L. I will stress loosely. Another two characters I kind of thought, especially by the end, to compare them with would be honestly like Batman and Joker. I was thinking back to like the movie The Dark Knight, where Joker says something like to Batman that they are basically the same, just on opposite ends of a coin. And Joker really believed him and Batman exist to continue to fight each other, at least in Joker's mind. Yashiro, at the very end, the last episode, he opens up to Satoru. And at this point in time, Satoru is recovering in the present time, as Yashiro had unfolded this whole evil plot on him. So Yashiro basically opened up to him that he decided to keep Satoru alive in order to fill in a void in his life, as strange as that sounded. I mean, I still don't completely know how to feel about it. I mean, it is a little cliche, but But then Satoru, he goes so far as to say that Yashiro has no other real drive in his life when he discovered Satoru's secret power. So this really just opens up this whole debate, as this idea was only just introduced at the very end of this series. And Satoru also goes on to say once Yashiro basically drew himself to a corner and they were able to get him arrested, Satoru then also mentions at the very end that his revival power never really happens again after Yashiro is put away. So it leaves us open-ended and leaving us with some questions.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, in this sense, this just kind of occurred to me right now. But as far as the revival power, it's almost like Yashiro sent away, therefore the revival's no longer needed in the sense.
Yeah.
That's the sense I got from that. And yeah, it did. The whole last episode kind of threw me for a loop. Because it did introduce a lot of these new ideas. That's why I'm not giving it like an 8 or 9 out of 10. Because they introduced so many new ideas in this new character dynamic that wasn't really there.
Yeah.
And they're interesting ideas, but I think that they deserve a more fleshed out exploration of them as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, from what I've heard about, reading a little bit on Wikipedia actually, and on and seeing other reviews about Erased on YouTube videos, they do say that Yashiro's backstory is fleshed out much more in the manga. From what I did read about on Wikipedia, it was saying stuff like he had a pretty disturbing childhood. Since I haven't really read the manga, I mean I don't know why Yashiro was driven to become as twisted as he is, as presented in the anime, because I didn't read the manga. But I mean, it would have been nice to get a little bit more explanation, especially for this last episode. I do remember, I think it was like the second to last episode when Yashiro was also comparing Satoru with some hamster that he actually tried to kill in his I forget whether it was in his childhood or if it was like in his early days as a teacher. At this point I don't really remember, but it was at some point long before he really knew Satoru, and he tried to drown a hamster like in a sink or something, and then like the next day when he found that it was either a hamster or was it something else?
I think it was a hamster.
Okay, yeah, because I thought so too. Yeah, when he tried to kill the hamster, and then the next day when he gets out of bed, he noticed that the hamster survived. So that became like this whole thing where it became like this kind of this strange epiphany to his life, that the hamster represents something to him, and he compared Satoru with the hamster. And another strange metaphor he made was whenever he saw Satoru in the anime, towards the end, he saw like a spider web connected to him. So I don't completely remember what the comparison that he was making, but that was yet another thing that I don't know, it had something to do with like him and Satoru having some weird connection.
Yeah, and as I'm thinking about this right now, this is sort of just what's coming to my head, is that I think the main problem of the ending that I had is that the first 10 episodes or so, or while it's not necessarily about the mystery, it's because it's not like a whodunit with there's only so many suspects you have, but it's more about Satoru's pursuit for the truth, for clearing his name, for saving his mother's life. It's about him trying to get something done. It's about his pursuit, and then in the last 2 episodes, it becomes about the two of them. And that's why it sort of threw me for a loop, because because up to this point, everything was literally in Satoru's head.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, and it kind of it felt like it became a slightly different show in the last show. Not a good show, but a different show.
Yeah. It's like, it does feel like we kind of got 2 shows stuffed in all of a sudden into one, especially within those last 2 episodes. Those last 2 episodes could have been a whole season or like a sequel show or something of its own. Because so much of it was the way it was presented was what was going on in Satoru's head. A lot of stuff with his mother, a lot of stuff with Hinazuki, and I mean the only payoff we really got with Hinazuki was she did end up having a decent life. She got married, she got at least 1 or 2 kids, and I don't know. I mean, it almost, I don't know. It almost seemed before like I was kind of wondering, was Satoru gonna really end up with Hinazuki in the future? But then from a storytelling standpoint, I could see how that really wouldn't have made sense, since Satoru was just putting his life on the line, like, just constantly, especially like in that whole section of the 1988 period that he was in those episodes. He was always putting his neck in the line.
Yeah, one of the things I liked about it is the fact that he would do something like I talked about I talked about before, where he would fix something and something else would happen to create another complication. Is that he would change certain events, like he would stop the murder from happening on a certain day, but then when he goes back, the murder still happened, but it happened slightly differently. And so so he was kind of felt like he was constantly thwarted the whole time by some other force, and that's what I mean. Like that's what really appealed to me about those first 10 episodes, about him and his struggle, rather than it becoming about these two, him and the villain. And so I think that's something that I wish there was done a little bit more with. And but overall I thought it was solid. But that's something that it could definitely use some work.
Yeah, and the ending is too, particularly when Satoru was coming out with his own sort of revelation to Yashiro, when Yashiro opened up to, I kept you alive because to fill in the void in my life, and that sounded just so dramatic. That Satoru he counters that with kind of affirming to Yashiro that you don't really have any real drive in your life just because you want to keep me alive. So this part of Satoru's personality sort of fell out of character since it just came out of left field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can definitely see that. It's something that it was not, like I said. There's not a lot of consistency, or not. There's not a lot of consistency, but there's moments of inconsistency of the character arcs and the character decisions in this show. That is one of them. I think that the whole reveal about Yashiro is like it comes out left field. The only reason why I sort of suspected it at first is because I just didn't know why that character existed. Like other than to why is he here other than to be the killer as well. But otherwise they're not really setting his arc up really particularly well, I would say.
Honestly, we could go on and on and on about this for forever, I feel like, but since we don't want to do that, let's draw to our final thoughts here. And I'm curious to hear what is your thought on the actual ending, where in the last shot where we see Airi all of a sudden in front of Satoru, and then it's kind of hinted that it looks like maybe they'll get together.
It felt tacked on, like you said. You don't worry, we didn't forget. It's like we almost forgot about this character. We should do something about this at the last minute.
Yeah.
Like it felt like it was just sort of there to remind the viewers that they are still aware that the character existed.
Yeah. Yeah, it did kind of feel that way. It did. I'm sorry to say, it did end up as a pretty cliche happily ever after kind of ending. But aside from that, yeah, it's like you said, I'll have to agree with you that it did feel kind of tacked on. That by the way, just so our viewers don't forget that we had this character, she existed, and plop, here she is, and now we have a happy ending.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right, so I think that's all we have to say about Erased. I mean, this was a solid show. Unfortunately, not the strongest ending we've ever seen, nor the strongest mystery aspect to it. But this was still a very good show, a show that was bold. It wasn't afraid to take chances with the characters and the themes it was presenting. So it's something we do need to see from anime more. So yeah, we're gonna take a break now.
Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, our next anime does absolutely none of the stuff we just mentioned. Does not take chances. Does not do anything bold.
And it's not even an anime. It was a movie based on an anime.
No chances whatsoever.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. So for this segment of the podcast, we're going to do a review of the recently released live-action movie of Death Note.
And remember all that great positive stuff we said about Erased? Well, kind of forget all about that and does none of that whatsoever.
Yeah, for this review, sadly, no. Not a lot of great things to be said about this. Netflix, you've done goofed up.
Yeah.
So, Death Note is it's a manga and anime originally, and it has now been adapted as an American live action movie. It has had at least 3 Japanese live action versions. This is now the first American live action telling of this story. So this atrocity of sorts was directed by Adam Wingard, who directed the reboot of Blair Witch, which I didn't see, so I'm not really familiar with his work. From what I've seen from this movie, I'm not too impressed with him so far. All right, so Hawkflame. How do we even begin to just dissect the pros, or in other words, the good qualities about this movie?
You mean the good quality, singular? Because really, there's just the one thing.
I think it's just one thing too. Yeah. Both me and Hawkflame, we did not enjoy this movie at all, barely. I think there was only one good thing about the movie that we both are on the same page that we both like, and that is, I think we both think that they did a good job with Ryuk.
Absolutely, I think that there was impeccable casting with Willem Dafoe as Ryuk. Honestly, a lot of the time it kind of reminded me of Green Goblin a little bit. But I thought that he was a kind of a perfect figure there. I thought that the voice was very well acted. I like the fact that he was kind of kept in shadow most of the time. You never really got a really good look at his face, because that otherwise he's a CGI character. It would look a little goofy.
Yeah.
So the fact that they kept him in shadow, they kind of just saw his eyes glowing. He had that creepy, Willem Dafoe Green Goblin voice coming out of him. He was actually very entertaining, in that I legitimately enjoyed the few times that he showed up on screen.
Yeah, for sure. Willem Dafoe, brilliant actor, possibly even more brilliant voice actor, or actually more accurate to say a motion capture actor. This guy, he's catching up to what's his name? Andy Serkis? Andy Serkis, who has played Gollum in Lord of the Rings, and then Caesar in the new Planet of the Apes trilogy. Sir, you are definitely catching up to him in mocap. But all right, I'll say one more half good thing, semi good thing, because it seemed like a good thing in the first half of the movie, and it actually did give me a little bit of hope that maybe the movie could be kind of good. Was I didn't really mind the Light and Mia relationship not so much really in like the first half hour of the movie, where it presented them in a much more of an involved and romantic relationship in this movie, as opposed to in the originals, where in the anime Light was just straight up manipulating Misa being the the original name of the character. So they renamed her Mia Sutton for this movie. I thought they're the fact that they were having like this kind of like romantic relationship that based on the idea that they can rule the world together was kind of cool. But they sadly completely screwed that up in the second half of the movie.
Yeah, well, I have to say that, okay, as far as qualities go, I will sort of give a little bit of credit to this movie, in addition to Willem Dafoe, is that fact that this film, unlike the anime, did not make me want to knock Mia's teeth out.
Man, you really, you really don't like.
I did not like Misa Amane. She's
Amane.
one of my least favorite characters in the anime. She was very annoying, and while this is not a particularly interesting character in this movie, she did not actively annoy me, at least.
Misa Amane is not getting enough loving. Not getting enough loving. I'm gonna have to do a whole separate podcast just on the original Death Note to defend Misa Amane. Poor Misa. But that's getting off topic. All right, so on to all the negative, and man, is there quite a bit.
Yeah.
All right, well, the most obvious, the first most obvious thing I could say is Netflix. Just why Adam Weingart? Why did you have to pick him as a director? I mean, this guy, you know, from what I've seen now in this movie, and from what I've seen in his, in his reel on like IMDb, and from trailers and such, he is a horror movie director. I mean, he directed the Blair Witch reboot, as I mentioned. Death Note it's bizarre in how it's complicated in how it's also trying to mix genres. It does have some horror elements to it, the anime, but it's not really a straight up horror. A good portion of this movie, at least in the first half, if not in the second half. In the first half, they, to some extent of it, they were really trying to play up the horror of this movie, especially with all the over-the-top deaths. Right. And it ended up not even really being good horror. It was just stupid.
It just felt like bad Final Destination. That was
yes, it was. Thank you. Okay, so he basically read my mind. It was not even good Final Destination. It was just straight up a cheap Final Destination.
Because at least Final Destination is tongue in cheek and it's intentionally funny. These deaths were just absurd.
Yeah, and as I said, Death Note, it was not meant to be complete horror. It's a suspense thriller with some elements of mystery and horror. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, those deaths just being super gory and over the top. I mean, it just came off cheesy.
Yeah, and I think that if anything, that kind of speaks to my problems with this. One of the problems I have with this as a film is just the directorial style of Adam Weingart that he employed here. Everything is so heightened. Everything is so like absurd, taken to an absurd extreme. When it comes to the deaths, when it comes to things, he uses a lot of like over the top slow motion, a lot of really cheesy music choices. So I think that heightened element of it, which was definitely there because I'll take a potato chip, all that stuff. That was definitely a little absurd, but I don't know. It just doesn't work here. It's just funny, It's not supposed to be funny.
Oh yeah. There's a whole nother genre. I'm sorry to say, there's a whole nother genre in this movie that it takes. That being crime thriller, and it messes even that one up too. So it's like, which genre that they're trying to fit into this movie are they trying to get right? Apparently none of them, because they all suck.
Yeah.
Oh man, and I'm gonna have to really go more deeply into talking about that aspect, the crime thriller genre that they try to fit in this movie, more in the spoiler section of this review, because there's really no other way I'm going to be able to talk about it without spoiling it.
Yeah.
So, okay, another thing I noticed, to me it seemed like way too many Death Note rules going on. How'd you feel?
It was weird that there are way too many rules in the beginning, but at the same time that they're missing some really important ones. I hate to compare it to the anime, but the anime include these rules for a reason. To not make it, to basically cover up a lot of potential plot holes. And there is no, I hesitate to go into possible spoilers here, but for instance, in the anime, there is a time limit as to how long each character has to do what they do before they die. And in this one, there's apparently no time limit. They could take, they could do whatever action it takes them years to do.
No, 2 days was I believe, yeah,
really?
up to 2 days.
Oh,
I remember. Yeah.
Even if it's 2 days. Even still, I think in the anime it's like 10 minutes or something like that. Where if you give them up to 2 days to do it, that opens up a whole lot of possible plot holes.
It was definitely absurd of how much time they were allowed to control the actions up till the time of death. 2 whole days. And they only did that to somehow make sense of the script writing of how they were trying to fit their plot together. But yeah, I mean, that was just way too much of a push. 2 days, and we're gonna have to touch on it again, in this review. So yeah, a lot of poor choices in the screenwriting here, especially with each of the characters. Light Turner compared to Light Yagami. Light Yagami being the original Kira in the Death Note anime. Light Turner is nowhere near as charismatic or smart as Light Yagami. Okay, Mia Sutton. They took a lot of interesting liberties with her. Interestingly enough, I didn't hate her as much as I did Light Turner. I thought Light Turner was just an absolute wuss. Mia Sutton was much more cunning and merciless than Misa Amane. Elle was decent in the first half of the movie. They did try to... They had to mimic the original Elle a little too much, to the point where it just looked weird and even awkward. And yeah, in the second half of the movie, even his character really sadly declines a lot by just making him way too emotional and way too impulsive.
Right. In general, the characters are not really consistently written, especially whereas you mentioned with Elle, but also Light as well. In the that's going to be into a spoiler territory right now, which we're not going into.
Yeah. So all the plot twists that were revealed in this movie, because there were quite a few. All related to the rules of the Death Note, and which character looked like they were coming up to the top, in terms of who's going to be the big winner in this whole this whole standoff that they were sort of setting up here. Excuse me. All those choices were done with very, very little payoff, and also being extremely lacking in being faithful to the original Death Note.
Yeah, I think that there was a lot of problems with this film. It goes without saying. It's just not just as an adaptation. I think that just as a movie, a lot of the narrative choices that they make, there's a lot of leaps in logic that are made by made by some of the characters, particularly Elle, that are kind of only there just because you need to advance the plot forward, and you need to sort of an abbreviated version of the anime storyline. Like there's certain, like Elle is not someone who. Okay, I hesitate to do a comparison because it's a different thing, but Elle is not someone who just acts so impulsively like that. He is someone who is much more measured. He is someone who tries to really doesn't say anything until he's absolutely certain.
Is much more calculated in the original than what we saw here in this movie. Elle was always meant to be more calculated. This was not really Elle. This was not a good rendition of Elle. And it's just, this whole thing is just boggling my mind, especially when I think about the ending. And I'm gonna have to save that for going into that deeply into the spoiler section. But the ending of this movie is super convoluted in ways that don't really make that much sense. Mm-hmm. So, both, like Hawk Flame said, even as a film, on its own, it still doesn't really work.
Yeah. And also, it's just a minor thing, but I found this kind of ridiculous, because apparently Watari's full name is just Watari.
Yeah, there you go.
It's just one name.
Yeah, like, is this guy like Seal?
It's kind of a stupid, but I thought that was kind of absurd.
Yeah.
And if it is his real name, then it makes Elle kind of an idiot by using his real name.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know, Hawk Flame. Do you have just any final words while we're still in the general review of this before we go into spoilers?
The general final words is that I actually owe a friend of mine dinner because I made her watch this with me, and she got so pissed off that I actually offered her dinner in exchange for this.
And I can vouch for that because he called me right after they finished the movie. And I could hear her talking in the background, and boy, did she sound pissed. Yeah, so to wrap up the general review, I'm gonna give this garbage. You know what? I was gonna be kind of nice to it and give it I was thinking a 3.5 out of 10. But the more I think about it, the more I've now thought about it and talked about it, I realize this movie doesn't even deserve that much. So I'm gonna give it a 2.5 out of 10.
No, that's pretty much exactly what I was gonna say. 2.5 out of 10 sounds. You pretty much just took the words right out of my mouth there. There are some good moments in this. But like literally, if this was all about Ryuk, it would be like a 10. That's how much weight.
At least a 9 out of 10. Yeah, if this movie was just like a solo Ryuk movie, that would have been much better. But I think I only give it 2.5. Ryuk being one reason, and Mia Sutton being an okay character, not great, but sort of okay. And the overall cinematography of this movie was pretty good. The directing, not so much.
Some very, very weird choices directing wise.
Oh yeah, definitely. A few good moments here and there. Surprisingly, some decent moments with Light's dad. And it's like, Light's dad was just a side character in the anime. He felt much more in the forefront in this movie. Like it was more of a character that had actually like weight to him in this movie, which wasn't really necessary. So yeah, a character that we didn't expect to have some like positive quality to the movie brought that brought that to us with this character. Aside from that, I mean, some decent moments with L in the first half, not really in the second half. And yeah, I mean, that's as much good as I could say. I mean, yeah, this movie is really. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it in any way. This is not a great movie in any way. It's 2.5 is, I think, the best we can give it.
The tone is very inconsistent. The directing is inconsistent. The writing is inconsistent. That's kind of what it's the most inconsistent film I've ever seen.
yeah, and that's saying a lot. That's no exaggeration. All right, so if you haven't seen the movie, pause this and then come right back. So yeah,
or rather, don't watch the movie.
or you could just stick around. We're gonna go into the spoiler territory now. So all right, so I'm gonna dissect the hell out of this movie. From the very beginning all the way to the end, going into all the spoilers. So the first thing I noticed was it was implied, in the early part of the movie that Ryuk was finding a chosen one each time to pass on the Death Note, and then if they don't use the Death Note after 7 days, it would pass on to someone else. So this was a new rule for those of you who don't know about the anime. This was a new rule that was put into the notebook just for this movie to somehow kind of keep the movie moving along, because the movie was only an hour and 40 minutes.
My God, it felt longer than that.
It really did. And yeah, already I had I had felt was a weak creative choice on the part of the writers. Already, this is like literally within like the first 10 to 15 minutes of the movie. already they're starting off with a pretty weak element. Next thing we know, it seems that Ryuk is largely responsible for influencing Light to use the notebook. And that was actually introduced even earlier in the movie. I'm thinking a little backwards. That was like 5 minutes into the movie where Ryuk is really insisting Light to write names down in the notebook and, telling him like, go on, write a name down. You want to do it. You want to. And he's telling him this when Light is in the classroom, being confronted by Ryuk for the first time and, with the Death Note in his hands. And he's looking out the window and he's seeing a classmate of his, this classmate of his who was presented to us like, a grade A douchebag. Someone who Light feels that, no one would really care if he was killed. So then, Light goes ahead, writes his name down, and final destination, death given to him, his head gets chopped off. So the comparison I have to draw here is that Light Yagami in the original anime, he was more skeptical when first using the Death Note because he was much smarter than Light Turner. Light Turner doesn't even question the power of the notebook at all when he's first using it. He just goes ahead and writes a name down just because Ryuk tells him to do so without really giving it a second thought. He just does it. And, Light Yagami, at least, he had a brain. And he tested it out. He wanted to see for himself that, is this really real or not? And he also questioned Ryuk's motives, in the first or second time he used it. And once he felt that, he had gotten enough information that he needed, then he decided to become a god of the new world in the anime. And, like I said, this Light, there's not a whole lot of depth to him. He's first pushed by Ryuk to use the notebook, and then when his relationship with Mia Sutton develops and he tells her about the power of this notebook, she becomes another influence, a much bigger influence to instilling thoughts into him that they can change the world with this Death Note.
Yeah, and I think that's my biggest problem with the character is that he has no agency. He is not someone who a good main character is someone who is not passive. He is someone who this is such a passive character in a sense because he is not someone who he operates under the influence of other characters. And that's the biggest problem with me. Because that's also, not only because that's not what the anime is. That's just not a charismatic character in general.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this Light Turner character, he was not really a character that compared to Light Yagami, who was a lot more charismatic and way more clever. This was not a character we sympathized.
I think that they're trying to be they're trying to make him more relatable because of the fact that they gave him sort of a backstory with the mom, which didn't exist. He was
and I forgot to mention that too. Yeah, so this movie, with the choices of the writing, it tried to kind of hammer down on us that this is a relatable character to us because his mom was killed by a criminal, and then Light the second time he uses the notebook to kill someone, he kills the man responsible for his mother's death. And he does this solely as an act of revenge. So I guess to one very minimal extent, Light Turner became sympathetic to us, but then that is rubbed off almost instantly when we're noticing that Mia Sutton really has him on a leash.
Yeah, he's become much more of an emotionally reactive character rather than a proactive character. You know what I mean? Like he's someone who, because that's another thing that that Light Yagami never was. And again, I don't want to belabor the comparisons to the anime, but one of the things that Light Yagami was, he was the one who was control of his own destiny in a sense. obviously, there would. Or he had agency. This character has no agency.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, the first plot twist I noticed was that the movie presents us with the element that Ryuk. It's like, okay, he calls whoever who becomes the holder of the Death Note, he calls them the Keeper. And then when Light is trying to show Mia Ryuk by touching the notebook, Ryuk reveals to Light that no one could see him other than the Keeper of the Death Note, which was an entirely stupid choice. I could see why they did this because of the fact that Mia wouldn't ever see Ryuk and catch on to the fact that he ended up taking a favoring to her. This would lead to her deciding to take matters into her own hands and going rogue by making her own decisions involving the Death Note behind Light's back as sort of the payoff here. But, you know, I didn't really feel this as a strong payoff. I mean, she was making decisions using the Death Note behind Light's back because she felt that Light was not strong enough to manage to make the decisions that he really needed to make in order to get them to pull themselves out of this sticky situation that they had fallen onto by the time that L had discovered them. You know, just me saying all of that, it just sounds so incredibly convoluted that it is, and one that doesn't even feel satisfactory, that is hurting my brain just thinking of that out loud and saying that for the review.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like there was I'm glad we're in spoiler territory because I have to get into this part. Is that fact that the things there was a definite shift. Even though I did not like the anime, I like the anime. I did not like the movie in the first half. There was a definite shift in the second half where it got more. It got more convoluted. It got more the plotting of Light versus L. It got more complicated, and that is something that they did bring in from the anime in a sense. But this is a problem: is that in the anime and the manga they built that. Light was building his plan, and L was building his plan in response, and Light built it more in response to that, and Light was thinking 5 steps ahead, and then L was thinking six steps ahead, and so on and so forth. Whereas it's more like here, it's like, oh, by the way, all this time, Light was thinking 10 steps ahead.
Yeah. And that was not even a good payoff because that completely came out of left field, one that we didn't see coming. And, you know, this should have been a cat and mouse game between Light and L. And in the end, it felt more like a cat and mouse game between Light and Mia. I always want to say Misa, but you know I have to say Mia because that's the name of her character in the movie. But yeah, it ended up being more of a game between them, especially by the end. You know, with Mia just starting to not trust Light that he could make, you know, the hard decisions that he needed to make, that she felt that he really needed to make, that he wasn't making, so she made those hard decisions for the two of them. And then the payoff didn't really play out as nicely as we as an audience probably would have liked, because like Hawk Flame said, Light Turner pulls a left field on us, pulls a 180 on us out of left field, that suddenly he became, you know, the mastermind where he thought 10 steps ahead, and he was able to put things into action into his favor. Makes no sense whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, to backpedal a bit here before we actually go into the ending, because we still have quite a bit more to say about the movie. Let's talk about L. So the L in this movie. So in the first half, I noticed they wrote him in such a way where they really, really tried hard to have this L imitate the mannerisms and the weirdness of the original L a little too closely, followed by L's strong sense of justice, and neither of these characteristics really paid off within the context of this story. since he became such an emotional bitch by the time Light took control of Watari. By the time we get to the part in the movie where the angle taken of Watari's kidnapping was used to play for a dramatic effect, I felt, in the way that it really pushed L over the edge to make things personal between him and Light. That's how I felt with these writing choices made in this movie for Light controlling Watari. I mean, the most obvious choice was that, you know, for the movie, they needed to figure out, okay, how can we have Light Turner, figure out a plan, come up with a plan to find L's real name. So, you know, within the context of the movie, the most logical choice was to just have him control Watari. But, you know, an underlying choice underneath that I could see as a writer is that they played this up way too much for dramatic effect just so they can have L be pushed over the edge, and now he feels that things are personal between him and Light. And they tried to sort of play this as a to try to make this similar to the anime, that in parts of the anime, L did feel that things were getting deeply personal between him and Light, but he would never get impulsive about it. He would always, present his thoughts and his stances all in his head. You know, all completely in his head. He would still keep his composure, never losing his cool.
Yeah, and so I think that he is not. When we talk about inconsistency, this is not. I have no sense of what the character is. You know what I mean? I don't. Like, he at the first they mimic the stylist. They mimic him kind of crouching and being kind of creepy and grabbing handfuls of candy and all that stuff in the first, and then he does become weirdly emotional in the second half, and I have no idea how to. I have no sense of who this is. You know, this is not a character that is really easy to kind of get a grasp of. I got it as poorly written as Light is for most of the movie. It's a consistently poorly written character. He's a whiner. he's easily led around a whiner, basically, but at least it's consistent.
At least, yeah. So that's really sad. He made me realize as well that that's pretty sad on the writers behind this movie, that at least they kept Light Turner consistently, whiny.
Yeah,
and they couldn't even keep the L character consistent.
Yeah, because I have no. Yeah, it just feels like this is just a weird. This is just some really weird dude. You know, like with the other character, with the original L, I got they had more time to explore this, granted, but I got a sense. I kind of quickly got a sense of who he is.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. It seemed to me that the whole scene that played out between L, Light's dad, and Light, where L accused Light of being Kira. He slams his fist on the table and then shouts to Light's father that your son is Kira. Yeah, I mean, that was overly dramatic, I felt. The original L, he had a better temperament. He would never do something like that. And then it seems to me that after that scene had played out, that it was implied that Light was able to somehow get his act together and then become the genius that he was supposed to be. So what do you have to say about that, Hot Flame?
Well, yeah, I think that because I didn't get that sense. I did not initially get that sense, because that's why because honestly I kind of stopped caring halfway through the film. So that's why a lot of this stuff was kind of brought to really surprise to me at the end, where it was revealed that he had planned all this stuff. But like I said, again, that's kind of on me, but that's also kind of on the movie, because I just stopped caring.
Yeah, and I can't really blame you for really stop caring, because just so many things were played up to being, overly dramatic. Both with, the writing on these characters, the inconsistencies, the tonal shifts. I mean, we got like over the top deaths here. We got serious, dramatic scenes playing out here, especially between Light and L. The movie, the part where the movie really started to go downhill for me. One scene where I didn't appreciate, although I was able to swallow, but nonetheless didn't appreciate, was L just, coming out into the spotlight in front of all the public and all the TV news and announcing he is going to find Kira and challenge Kira. The original L would never actually show himself in public like that, even though this L wore a mask. So, that did bother me a little, but the scene where I felt that this movie really, really started to, fall flat on its face entirely was the scene where L introduced himself to Light Turner that, hey, I'm L. And, trying to investigate, what do you think about Kira or whatever he said. I don't even remember how the conversation started. I just remember that L, introduced himself to Light, that he is L. And from there, that's when the movie sorely started to go extremely downhill for me.
It started much earlier for me, honestly. I think that pretty much the time. Ironically, the moment that the best character in the film showed up is when it kind of Light's whole reaction to Ryuk's arrival is just comical. It was comical. There's a lot of things that are kind of comical in this movie.
Yeah. This movie ends up being more of a how can we call? It's like one of those movies that is so bad it's funny. So I'm sure that this live action Death Note is gonna go down in history as like a cult movie of some sort. But
yeah, at the final scene where they're falling off the Ferris wheel and that music started playing, I laughed out loud. I laughed loud at that.
That's some pretty poor, song choice they put there. Like Power of Love. Mm. They put a lot of 80s songs in this movie that felt so out of place. And a lot of what a lot of other reviewers on YouTube have been saying is they just think that they've been putting 80s song that they put 80s songs in it just because right now it's the cool thing to do. It's just straight up ridiculous, most of the choices put in this movie. But okay, but to get back on track here with, hammering on some more specific elements of the movie that I also didn't really appreciate at all was, as I mentioned before, the whole crime thriller genre that they tried to sneak into this movie. And again, I feel like this movie is trying to sneak in a little bit of everything and failing on every attempt, which really just brings me to the verge of tears. Is again the fact that they were trying to sneak in crime thriller genre here. Especially by the time it got to the point where L was, chasing down Light on foot. Again, this was, overplayed, definitely cliche. What else could I say? I've lost train of my thought, but Hawkflame, what do you have to add here?
It's just, like I said, there was nothing interesting about this. I just don't really have a lot to say because at this point I stopped caring. Like, these characters are not interesting. This story is not. This is the most interesting thing about Death Note was the cat and mouse, over the top cat and mouse. Like, I did this, therefore he does that, therefore I'm gonna do this in response to that. And they tried to do that, and it was kind of too little, too late at that point. The foundation on which it was built was just not. I just didn't care about these characters.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I could actually say one thing about that when you mentioned cat and mouse. Again, it it felt too much like the cat and mouse ended up being between Mia and Light, which that's how it shouldn't have been that way, because the next really big plot twist I noticed in the movie was we were first led to believe that Ryuk found a loophole in killing detectives on his own when Light couldn't be strong enough because he refused to kill innocents. And this was a pretty big weak choice on the part of the script. It was only revealed to us towards the end when Light and Mia are on the Ferris wheel, and Mia reveals to us that she took matters into her own hands by ripping off a page of the Death Note, and then she controlled a detective to write the names of other task force members, and then they would proceed to go on and walk off the skyscraper, leading to their suicides. So this was inspired from the original. I could see what they were trying to accomplish with this, because an element of this was something we sort of saw in the original, but they just totally took it out of context and honestly bastardized it in this movie, the way they executed it. And then there's also, we didn't even get to talk about another plot element that I had really big problems with, and I think one of the biggest problems of this movie. I mean, there's so many problems with this movie, and here you hear me saying that I have yet another really big problem with this movie. I'm really starting to feel like I'm sounding like a broken record here, but I digress. So another big problem I had with this movie was the plot element that it introduced to us with another new rule in this in the Death Note was burning a page. If you and it's a little tricky to explain this, but I'll do the best I can. Is that if you write someone's name down on the notebook, you could still control their actions up to 2 days. And then, but then, if you burn that page of the person's name that you wrote down, you can actually spare their life. So, the only catch to this was that this was built for a one-time use only, and this is something that Mia took advantage of. So, this rule, Light tried to take advantage of as much as he could, and the way he used it was he wrote Wataru's name down on the notebook to control him so that he could hunt down L's true name, because L's real name was so very difficult to find, and the only record of his true name was only to be found in the orphanage he grew up in. But of course, Light's plan didn't go accordingly, since Mia took that page that he wrote on, and instead of allowing him to fulfill his plan by later on taking that page and burning it, she had the page, and instead she used that rule and wrote Light's name down on the notebook from a page that she tore out, in order to apply this rule of burning that page instead, so that he may transfer the ownership of the notebook to her. And she did this so that with the belief that suspicion of Light being Kira would be dropped, since L had such heavy suspicion of Light being Kira by this point in the movie. So in other words, Mia actually tried to be the real manipulator and mastermind behind everything. She was more like the true Kira than Light really was. And well, that's how it was presented to us towards the end, until the movie pulls a 180 on us again with the writing, and then all of a sudden it's revealed to us that Light, somewhere along the lines, did think things ahead, possibly after the whole scene between him and L and his dad, that, you know, he decided to wisen up and he thought things through to the point where he had written things down that it would play out to his favor, so that Mia would die in what would look like a Ferris wheel accident, and he would control people that would save him and put him in a hospital. Just super convoluted. It's making my mind hurt. Hawk Flame.
Which I don't mind if they would have introduced that earlier, because that is kind of what the anime was built on, to some extent. But like it because of the fact that it was not explored. If they started out with that kind of tone of that tone that whole ending had from the beginning, which is what the tone of the entire anime was.
Right.
I would have been able to buy into it a lot more, but the fact is that they tried to set it a little bit more, like they tried to make it almost more quote unquote relatable, almost quote unquote realistic, and then they introduced these over the top elements at the end there. Like in terms of you know, there's always over the top elements in the film before with the deaths and whatnot, but in terms of things like the you know the reveals, the plot, and so forth, it came too little too late, and it was such an abrupt shift tonally that I didn't. It's not that I didn't mind it being convoluted, because again, that's true to what the anime was in that sense. But just the fact that it decided then to become convoluted.
Yeah, because the way the movie was kind of playing out, presented to us in like a good 3/4 of the whole movie was like part horror, part part thriller, and then part crime thriller, and then, you know, all the convoluted, more mind aspects to the original Death Note was just introduced to us way too late, you know, right at the end.
Yeah, he was being the main character was being set up as a different person almost, until, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he was not someone that finally in the ending. Oh yeah, now he's basically like Yagami at the end.
Basically, yeah.
And then again, it would have been. It wouldn't. I don't know if it necessarily would have been a good movie, but at least would have been closer to the anime. It would have been more. It would have been more entertaining. It could have been. It would have eliminated the major tonal shift, which is like a problem with the direction.
There's so many inconsistencies with the writing of this movie, and particularly, I could point out, you know, the one really, really big inconsistency as to why I'm not being sold on this ending of Light being, you know, a new genius all of a sudden. Especially when, you know, a few minutes before he gets onto that Ferris wheel to meet Mia, and by this point, it's you know, by the time we do get to the ending, it's revealed to us that Light thought things through farther ahead, and now we're supposed to believe that he is a genius. But a few minutes before, here we see him revealing to L one crucial part about his secrets of him and the Death Note that he should not have revealed to L. That, you know, he says something like, death can be handed as easy to you with something like a calculus textbook. And that's something he should not have said to L. Because, you know, I mean, the L in this movie is still technically, I mean, it seems like he was still smarter than Light. Logically, that is how they wrote him in this movie, that he was smarter than Light. So, he was able to figure things out after that whole climax, that ridiculous climax that we saw with Light and Mia being on the Ferris wheel, and then the Ferris wheel crashing and it leading to Mia's demise, and then that one page of the notebook where Mia did write down Light's name being burned into a trash can randomly. He even thought that through, when it seemed to us that, this was like a surprise revelation to Light. So a little after that whole climax played out, L was able to figure out that Mia did have a calculus textbook, and then he found one of the pages of the Death Note that she used ripped out in the book, and he was able to kind of put two and two together and see for himself, like, okay, it seems like Light wasn't exaggerating after all. Maybe death is as easy as just writing a name down. And we see when one of the last shots in the movie, Elle is looking at a photograph of Light and Mia, and we see that we see his expression on his face is basically telling us that he is contemplating whether he should write Light's name on the page of the Death Note or not. And this is probably my last problem with the movie. I mean, I obviously have a million problems with it, but I guess this would be my last problem with it, is that it's implied to us that it seems that Light has outsmarted L to the point where he has made him see the worst side of himself. It's implied to us that L has now stooped down onto Light's level. Maybe. It's a very big maybe, because it leaves us on a cliffhanger that, you know, is he gonna write Light's name down or not?
Like, you know, at this point, I just stopped caring. And I hate to keep harping on that, but like, this is this is not something. At this point, I just didn't even give this film that much thought.
Yeah, I was more attentive.
Yeah. I tried to. I tried to pay attention. It was just
writing down all these points and all these flaws in terms of the script and direction. Man, this gave me a lot of homework.
I dare. It's not. You can't blame me. I dare anyone who doesn't make an active effort to pay attention to things in the film to actually care the last 10 minutes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So let's finally bring this atrocity of a movie to a close. Present our closing thoughts at last. Death Note 2017 is a movie that had a lot of potential and some nice tributes to the original Death Note, at least in the first half of the movie. There was one good nod to the original Death Note, I thought. Things did start to gradually fall apart, though, when L presented himself to the public to challenge Kira, and especially when, he presented himself to Light. All these loopholes and plot holes and all the convoluted aspects being introduced to us one by one was gradually tearing this movie down, spelling its own demise, and the filmmakers didn't even realize it themselves. The whole thing with Light pulling a 180 out of nowhere, suddenly he's the genius, he's thought everything through, and oh, by the way, he's still spilling the beans, revealing one crucial part of his secrets to L, that death is as easy as giving it away to someone on a calculus textbook, something stupid like that. I mean, whoever wrote that line, what were you smoking that day, or whatever you were doing? You were not thinking that through. A lot of things played for dramatic effect and failing. The whole L being too emotional and too impulsive for dramatic effect. These mix of genres not really being executed well. I think it's safe to say, Hawk Flame, this movie is a shit show with little to no payoff.
Yeah. I mean, there is a good character, and there is a character that is not as bad as as the anime. Other than that, it's just even taking the comparisons of the plot to the original material out, it just doesn't work as a film. Like the character, there are leaps in logic that are made that make no sense, that are only there for plot convenience. The characters are not really written consistently for the most part, and it is just a totally awkward and inconsistent movie.
Yeah. There's really no other way to say it. So, I would say if you are a Death Note fan, watch it at least just once, just to see for yourself, what this was. Don't expect much. This is a giant disappointment. And I really hope that we never get any movies like this ever again, but that is wishful thinking. As there are a good number of anime live action adaptations along the way. The only redeeming quality about this movie is that it's so bad. Parts of it are laugh out loud funny. I mean, I think we could agree with that. So watch it just that one time, just for that.
I gotta be honest, with the whole, again, bring up the whole Ferris wheel scene, what was coming to my mind was the intro of Deadpool. The slow motion, the cheesy 80s love song, the slow motion violence, the cheesy 80s love song, it just made me think of Deadpool, and I don't think I was supposed to do that.
Yeah. This movie can be. I'll give it this. This movie can be a good time with friends and drinks. I'll give it that. It looks like this movie is destined to become a cult movie. It's just sad that it's a very poorly written movie.
But if you're expecting something, if you're expecting a serious film, like a good serious film, you prepare to be very disappointed.
Yeah. As a serious film that has that has good structure to it and good thought to it, good writing, good aesthetic. Don't expect any of that. This is the lowest caliber of a B movie you'll see in quite a while. Mm-hmm. So with that being said, Death Note 2017 is one of the cheesiest and worst adaptations of a movie I have ever seen.
What else can I say to that? I think that pretty much says it right there.
So, guys, thanks for joining us. Hawk Flame, give a little shout out to your YouTube channel.
Don't forget to subscribe. My YouTube channel is Everything Geek, or it's Everything Geek, aka Hawk Flame. It's a mouthful, but yeah, there you go. Check it out. I have a lot of geek related stuff there. I just put up a New York Otakon, a cosplay video. I'll have some more material up pretty soon. So why don't you guys check it out?
Yep, and I'm Screen Direct, and this has been another episode of Critically Random. I'll let you guys know when I do put up my new YouTube channel. See you guys later.